Okay, we are now live on YouTube, and Chair Wilson, you're ready to go.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our meeting today. I had to check what today was. Today is November 5th, 2020, and we are here with our weekly Police Accountability Board meeting. So considering what most of us just watched, I would like to take the opportunity to discuss what just happened in the City Council meeting regarding our confirmation of our Executive Director. And so I know we do have an agenda to get to. We can either go ahead and approve the minutes and then just start talking about it, or we can wait. I will go ahead and defer to the board, whatever format they would like.
Let's talk.
Can you put the minutes up, please, Connor?
Oh, sure. Give me 1 second to get the minutes here. Maybe. Okay, so let me share the screen. Okay, so these are the minutes. This is from the October 29 minutes. So this is from last week's regularly scheduled board meeting. They're a little more detailed than normal, but.
Down, or is that the end of them?
Oh, that's the end of them. Yes, sorry.
So I make a motion that we accept the October 29th minutes as is, or if there's any concerns, people can voice them now, but if no one has any concerns, that we accept the minutes.
Need a second, please.
I second.
Okay, all in favor of approving the minutes for October 29th, 2020?
Aye.
Okay.
Okay, these are for last night's minutes.
Okay. That motion passes. And then these are November 4th, the special meeting that we were discussing Wilmer Hale.
Rabbi Settle, I took this from your statement during the meeting. Try to be as close to it as possible.
I make a motion that we accept these minutes if no one has any concerns or issues for the November 4th minutes.
Second, please.
I second.
Thank you. All in favor of approving minutes for November 4th, 2020? Raise your hands, please. Okay, none opposed. All right, so motion passes. Okay, so those minutes are approved.
Chair Wilson,
Yes, ma'am.
before we begin the rest of our meeting, I would like to put forward a motion to have a vote of confidence in our both our nominated executive director and you as chair of our board.
Second.
And can you explain for the audience what vote of confidence is, please?
It means that we are supportive of you and your public statements and the work that you have been doing.
Thank you. So I guess
We're at your back.
okay, so I guess that motion's on the floor and it was been seconded by Dr. Bob. So all in favor?
Aye.
No confidence. Okay.
Of confidence. Yeah.
Sorry,
Of
of confidence. I couldn't get all of that.
Yes, confidence.
And
Thank
all
you,
right,
members of
so
the-
there's none opposed, so motion passes. Thank
that
you.
means a great deal. Thank you. And
It does. Thank you so much.
So, I had an agenda for this meeting. Hold on, family's calling. I had an agenda for this meeting that started off with a brief conversation about confirmation hearings and then moving to some other things, including our executive order task force work. Maybe that we just talk about the confirmation hearings. I'm happy to start by giving some context, update anyone who doesn't remember everything that happened. So let me start. So, when I came on board, we are in the middle of next year's budget process in the city. And in November, what the city usually does with departments is it gives them a maintenance of effort number that allows them to, it's based on whatever you got last year, and you work within that framework moving forward. And the way that the current city budget is set up is that, the PAB is seen, or at least by the budget department, as a subunit of city council, just like the city clerk is. And that's important because, at a meeting I had, I guess beginning of last week, with city council chief of staff and members of office and management and budget, what was made clear to me that the board would not be able to propose its own budget, but it would instead have to work within whatever figures were set for it by the city last year, which is $400,000. And at that meeting, I expressed some concern for two reasons. First, this, as I've explained to all of you, the city charter makes pretty clear that the Police Accountability Board is an independent agency. And at minimum, we should be treated as a separate department from city council for budgetary reasons. Now, it's not just the budget that we're treated in this way. When it comes to staff, when it comes to hiring, when I have my hours approved, it has to be by BJ Scanlon, chief of staff. When I, try and revise, I can't hire anyone until I make revisions to our current salary lines. And to even do that, I have to have sign off from city council. So, to do, and, office equipment, all of this, it has to run through city council. So the internal city processes don't treat us like an independent department with a department head that's separate, we're subordinate. And this came up in this board meeting, in this budget meeting, where, it was communicated to me that the board would not be able to propose its own budget. And I responded with the concern of, the city charter, the text of it makes us an independent agency as I read it. And second, that the city charter's, section 18-13 has a pretty specific budgetary process that the board has to follow. We're pretty rare. It's really only the Board of Education that in the city charter has a special budgetary process. And, what I heard in the meeting was the board doesn't have a special budgetary process. You don't get to propose a budget to city council or the mayor, as it says in city charter you have to do, nor is there a requirement that the board have to propose a budget that meets certain sufficient funding requirements. The city charter says that the board's proposed budget has to include enough funding to provide for all complaints to be reviewed and processed in 90 days and funding to exercise all of our powers. Part of what I wanted to express to in this budget proposal is that we need significantly more funding to do that 90-day. I've done a pretty deep, you've all seen my budget proposal, during the interview process. I have a 50-page document that kind of does the details and data from other civilian review boards to figure out what it would take to meet that city charter requirement. So, I expressed this to OMB and, the answer was essentially like, you don't get to do that. And again, because I'm so focused on following the law here, what I want to do first, what any lawyer does is you write a memo. You write a memo about, what the law appears to say. And the way that you do that in the context of statutory interpretation, at least in New York State, is you do three things. First, you look at the text of the law, the face of the law. And the text of the law says nothing about us reporting to city council, being a subordinate unit of city council, any of the usual things you'd expect to have us be a subordinate unit. Instead, it calls us an autonomous office of the government, an independent office of the city. And so that those statements combined with a bunch of other things in the city charter, give you a really strong sense that we're an independent agency. And then, I went through two other things that you have to check. It's called legislative intent and statutory context. Legislative intent is just looking at what courts believe the intent of the legislature was. It's a common misperception that the legislative intent is just whatever Congress or city council happens to think on a given day, looking back. So it's not legal for a current city council to look back and say, well, this is what we meant, right? Because if that was what it was, then the laws would change every time there was a new city council member, right? The way that we do legislative intent is we ask, all right, given the public documents that are out there, the text of the law, text of past laws, that kind of stuff, what was the intent of the legislature? What were they dealing with? What did they reject? And then, an early draft of, the legislation that's posted on the city's website, it says the Police Accountability Board shall report to city council. In the final text of legislation, that line was deleted. So that's generally when we're doing statutory interpretation, that's a smoking gun evidence that the city rejected something. And finally, you look at the statutory context, and the statutory context is the rest of the city charter. You can see how the city charter treats other departments when they are subordinate, when the mayor controls them or city council controls them. And there's, all these indications of whenever the city charter wants something to be subordinate, and none of those indications are in the Police Accountability Board law. So these three things, if you analyze them, it's unambiguous, really, that we are an independent agency in this sense. Now, of course, independent agency doesn't mean city council doesn't control us. They have great control over this. They appoint all the members. They can remove any of you. They can remove me. They can set our budget. Even though we propose a budget, they're free to reject it. City council also has many other abilities over us. They can order an audit. Any recommendations we make, it's city council that has to finalize them. So, while we are an independent agency, according to my memo that's, analyzing the text of the law, we still have to have a working partnership with city council. So I wrote this memo to discuss this staff question about how to deal with this internal budgetary process. I wrote the memo, I drafted it over the weekend, and I sent a copy to, I believe, Rabbi Settle, Dr. McIntosh, and our chair. And part of the reason that I just sent it to them was I said, this is a staff matter. This is the way things get done in the federal government. When staff are dealing with, principals by which I mean, the actual heads of agencies, be it you guys as the board or city council, you don't get them involved until staff have come to an impasse on something. So the standard operating procedure in many governments, all the ones that I've worked for and work within, is that you have staff level discussions, including the chief of staff. That's how you do this. So if the chief of staff and the staff can't figure things out, then you go to your principals. So, I looped, the head of our folks in just for situational awareness because I'm just getting started on all this, right? And so I can show you the memo that I sent. Here's the text of it. I can also show you the email I sent and all that. And, part of the reason I didn't release this memo publicly is because this is something that's supposed to get worked out with staff. I mean, these are just kind of nuts and bolts of government. And the hope was that this could get dealt with by staff without having to involve other people. So I didn't make the memo public or anything like that. But I just
want to ask a question real quick, please.
Yeah.
So I just want to ask, before you sent this memo out, was there any direction from the chief of staff or any of the staff up there about the hierarchy or any other ways about how things are done, about staff memos or about anything? I just want to ask. No,
again, it would be highly unusual for a chief of staff to automatic. And again, maybe it's different in city. It would be very unusual to do that. And I was never told that there was a different default rule.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that the rest of the board is hearing this.
And I also want to make clear, the city council chief of staff never said that he was sending the memo on to the city council. That was never told to me. In fact, no one replied to my memo. I can show you the email that I sent, and I will. Give me 1 second to.
If you haven't made those,
don't need to show it now.
Yeah, do they need to? Can you just forward them to our city emails and we can review them at that time?
Sure. Again, we'll talk about all this in freedom of information law, but we can always remember that we can make sure that we have to remove people's addresses and stuff to information. But the memo itself we can show, and I will show. So let's get that up on the board. So here we go. This is the memorandum of independence. You'll note that so the to and from and CC are all reflected in the email itself. So it's sent to BJ Scanlon, who's chief of staff at City Council, Chris Wagner, who's the head of Office of Management and Budget, and Sarah Ruckberg. These are the people in that budgetary meeting with me. So there's no to City Council, it's to BJ as a person in City Council. And also CC'd Stephanie, who's on this video with us from the law department. In my email, I asked the law department if they have any opinions or questions or different perspectives on this memo, right? So again, this memo is to start a conversation about how to change internal budgetary procedures, right? And, I'm happy to walk through the entire memorandum. The argument that I made earlier goes over everything that's in the memo. This is pretty long. This is standard for a legal memo. I'm just going to scroll through it. It's heavily footnoted. It goes through, again, you feel free to reread all of it. It's very detailed. It compares our agency to other agencies, goes through the history. This is a standard legal memo, and it ends with, talking about, cooperative relationships between the board and other parts of city government, and it's explaining why the law requires all of this, right? Again, I'm coming from this perspective as a lawyer working in the context of an agency. We have to try and follow the text of the law. And, you know, I'm not sure that I'm not going to say anything further on that. I'm just going to say is that this is a very standard legal memo, and this is the way that you distribute these memos in the context of any agency or government. But, you know, there are different default rules for city, and now I guess I understand them.
So would Stephanie be able to speak to any of the default settings for our city?
And also I'd like to know if since it sounds like Connor was not given a response, if you had any issues with this memo.
To the extent you're asking about a legal opinion related to the memo, I'll be happy to talk to Connor offline about that. Similarly, if you're looking for sort of guidance related to how the city functions internally, that's something that I'd rather put in writing and not discuss in an open meeting.
So Stephanie, then I would appreciate a memo from you on the points of law with which you, if you disagree with Connor, would you please distribute that to the board as a whole? Thank you.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
I just want to ask a question. You can at least answer if there was a follow-up memo or anything sent to Connor regarding this memo.
To be honest, I honestly am not sure. I have not addressed it yet. I received it Monday. I took yesterday off, so there have been 2 work days in between the two. You know, again, it's on my list of things to do, but I was unaware that the memo existed until it had already been sent out to people in addition to me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I just want to say, on a point of order, like Stephanie's been nothing but very, very helpful and cooperative with me. And I think that if Stephanie had, you know, I was, point is that's all I'm going to say on this memo with regards to Stephanie.
Okay, what's our next agenda item? Just so we can move along.
Well,
actually don't
well,
really
before
yet. Yeah, because I still think that we still have stuff to discuss as far as the I actually want to say something about my concern about that meeting, folks, because we have and I don't, and maybe you all can remember when the last time we had asked City Council to join us in a meeting. I think it was over 2 months ago. And, you know, one of the things I think is clear from what we just witnessed is that there was a breakdown in communication. And so it is my hope that after this confirmation hearing, that will be quickly remedied. And that's all I'll say about that.
well, I have a comment, and I guess the easiest way to say it, Connor, is I think we're small enough and intimate enough that most things should be copied to the rest of the board. It's I don't mind that there's a certain amount of furor every now and then. I just like to know that it's on its way.
Of course.
I'd like to just comment watching that hearing that while it's apparent that it seems apparent that you are following a different kind of procedure than what the city government follows, right? To your understanding, Connor, that you were like, this memo has a certain connotation within your professional sphere. It's meant to start a dialogue. You said that in response to Councilman Evans, that you were not dictating policy. You were starting a conversation around interpretation, correct?
Right.
Yeah. It's in the same way that we discussed last night. And I want to hold up that many of the same concerns that were discussed last night were brought up by city council members as well regarding the Wilmer Hale hiring in terms of just transparency concerns and all those other things. That it's frustrating to see so many people afraid to have that conversation in public. And you're raising issues about interpretation of the law, and either because it seems intimidating or because it seems like it's too much work to read a memo. But it seems to me that's the government's job, to not just read things and react, but to carefully consider them, have a conversation, and to do it in a civil and democratic way. And it felt like despite that didn't happen, I think the way that you're used to in your professional settings with people of your skill level and caliber, I want to commend you on how well that you maintained your integrity and candor throughout that conversation, that you respected the people coming at you, even when they were, I felt at very times, very disrespectful in the way that they decided to question your character and question your integrity. And I'm glad that this board unabashedly voted our vote of confidence in you. I'm sorry that you had to endure that without any warning or without any kind of conversation. And I hope that on Tuesday night, there can be a little bit better of a respectful tone in recognizing what you do bring to this. What you're bringing to this is a level of depth and engagement to do exactly what City Council and others have been encouraging us to bring an executive director in to do for the last 8-9 months, and you're here. And I hope that they can appreciate the level of skilled attention to detail and also the humility you showed in that hearing, as well as from Chair Wilson, and trying to also stand with you in that integrity and to stand on the integrity of this board. And so I think I appreciate being represented by the both of you and having our integrity and our work respected by both of you and represented that way. So thank you.
Thank you, Reverend. All I want to say is that, my job is to protect you. My job is to stand up for this board. The reason why I'm so excited about this work is because I believe every single one of you is the right person to do this work. I get excited up in the morning. I get excited for our board meetings. I get excited for the things you say, the energy you bring, the perspectives, every one of these one-on-ones. And that's what drives me to write these memos. It's what drives me to get up and do these confirmation hearings. And even if City Council decides to reject me, I am so happy of the work that I've done with all of you. And I just hope that I get a chance to continue doing that work.
So can I say this? This is the second meeting that I've witnessed with Connor, and even in the word that I'm excited. So first I would say there's some things I'd like to say, but I'd like to say them to you, Connor. But secondly, I'd like to say you're brilliant, and we know that. And I would just say, as a leader who have to speak to people, I would say manage the excitement. We got to handle the excitement, and the rest of it I'll say to you directly, just based on having witnessed 2 meetings, and I think you're doing a great job. The lay of the land is very important. The lay of the land is very important. Who you're talking to is very important. And so
I look forward.
I just want to share some things, leader.
Reverend Harvey saved me in a meeting yesterday, talking to some people, and I just continue to enjoy your. I look forward to learning everything that you're going to tell me.
Connor, I would say from that meeting that it is clearly evident to us as a board, and hopefully to the city of Rochester, as to why we chose you. It should be clear. And, you are the right person for this job. We stand behind our vote, and we know that the city of Rochester stands behind us as well, because 75% of us voted for this right here. And so we can do the best job that we can. And I believe that you will help us to do that. So I just say thank you. I'm sorry about all of that. And I also say thank you for doing all that you've done so far. All right.
I would echo that. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Also, I want to say something else, which is that I feel that some of the approach, shall we say, to you was not just disrespectful of you, but of our work as a board. That given everything we've put into this, how intense our search process was and how much work we put into that, and how thoughtful I feel everybody on this board was about all of this, and that we're able to reach a consensus, that the only thing that the council members seemed to be concerned about was a memo that clearly they felt somehow threatened them. And that I would hope instead, as opposed to in any way wanting to know more about, why after this process you were the person we chose, but also that I would hope that they would be proud that they created an independent board. That this is exactly part of why, sorry, the cattail here, of why oh, Rochester can be such an example and such a pioneering effort here, maybe whatever. And I would hope they could take pride in that. And it seemed that instead they were somehow feeling threatened or challenged. And that's really disappointing to me. And it's disappointing that that was the only thing for the most part they wanted to talk about. So I just want to say that and acknowledge that, and we all deserve better.
Am I the only person that thinks that Connor should have a follow-up with Loretta?
I do not think you're the only person that thinks that.
I
I just was looking at her. You know, I know Loretta pretty well. I think it would be a good idea.
Yeah.
But again, we've invited council to talk to us.
We have.
You know,
No,
right?
I'm talking specifically about Loretta.
I understand. And building, I'm sure Connor is working on building all those relationships.
I did reach out to the president to request a meeting. I can follow up again.
Can I
Yeah.
just comment something? You know, I agree with everyone else. I think that considering that this is something new, that this has not been done before in many places, you know, that we didn't have an executive director for a very long time, that we're all doing the very best that we can. I also know that with government, we're gonna make mistakes, right? We're not always gonna follow the right protocol or the right procedures of things, because this is all new to us. I mean, the man has only been in the position for a couple of weeks. You know, I just wish everybody gives him a break, and again, not feel challenged or feel threatened by what he is proposing on our behalf, but instead being able to support that. And again, having dialogue. And I think there needs to be a follow-up meeting, either with Loretta or the entire board, since they all had so many opinions about it, and to clarify everything that took place today. I was embarrassed by the way that Connor was treated and the way that he was approached. And here you are. The reason why I don't have my camera on is because I'm not feeling very well. So I caught the tail end of it, and it was enough to make me feel even more ill. So I'm just hoping that we can remedy this and move forward.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. While Connor and I have also spoken about the budget, I think that one of the things that may have been overlooked is that he's offering a sustainable solution, in a sense, that it's not just let's kind of do some patchwork or let's get some recommendations and stop there. It's, you know, if we get these powers back, what's our next step and how are we going to be able to sustain that? And currently as it stands, we can't sustain it with decreased resources. As many other organizations that are a part of this, task force have stated that they even have limited resources. So I didn't really hear anyone say anything about that. There was a lot of cutting down of the budget, and which I can totally understand to a certain degree, but we also need to have sustainable solutions and not band-aids on certain things going forward.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair. I guess the last thing I'll say is that I found, you all know how much work this takes. And it has been an incredible amount of running around, chairing, I know, people have their opinions, but chairing this board is not easy. It is probably one of the hardest things I've ever done. And I'm very concerned about the communication with City Council. And I'm also just disheartened by this entire process. And so I will make an effort to reach out again and ask for a meeting as well. And I will also ask for a meeting for us as the PAB and with City Council, all of City Council, to so that we can hopefully build some bridges of communication, because I do believe that, this could have been discussed in a different way. And it really just was disheartening. And that's all I guess I can say. So that's the last thing I'll say. So does anybody else have anything to say about this matter?
I do. I just want to make two things clear. Between sending the memo, I believe Monday morning, and tonight, I had no official communication from any council member or council staff that there was a problem. I just want, and if I had, I would have immediately contacted those people. I would have let the board know. You know, I want to make that very clear.
Yeah.
You know, if I'd known tonight was coming in that way, it would have been different. The second thing I want to make clear too is, you know, I think there's a question of protocol. And I think that's a fair question. Me figuring out, you know, okay, when a memo gets sent to someone, it's though, you know, again, that's one question. But the other question, it clearly came up in the meeting, which is, you know, the substantive question of whether or not the board has this power, whether or not the board is actually fully independent in all the ways that the law appears to say it is. And, you know, regardless of whether or not I, you know, get confirmed, I would hope that this board takes seriously that question. And, you know, think carefully about whether or not my confirmation vote is a made contingent on the board not having certain powers. That's all I'll say.
Okay, so let's move on with the agenda. I will pull that up. Let's see. Okay, so Connor, can you give us a report on the mayor's survey and related updates, please?
Yes, let me just pull up my thing here. Okay, here's the presentation. Okay, it's the wrong date, but so we're going to start with the confirmation hearings. We already talked about that. We're going to talk about some general updates, and then we're going to talk about really exciting stuff, the proposed framework for Executive Order 203 task force work. Not exciting. It's not exciting. It's just normal. Okay, the confirmation hearings, here's some general updates. So first, Chief Harriet Sullivan released earlier this week a 90-day plan for review and reform of her own department. It starts with a 90-day review. It's going to involve, quote, critical stakeholder meetings, gathering information from the community about the police department's work, and finally, a thorough review of police policies and procedures. This is all in that brief memo that I circulated earlier. So you can read the details, but in essence, it boils down to these four things. So the question is, how do we, you know, address the chief's plan as the Police Accountability Board? Chair Wilson and I are set to meet with the chief tomorrow. And so if there's any questions that board members want to have asked, I think that'd be a great place to have them asked. I'm going to be asking some questions about data gathering, et cetera, but please, you know, folks have anything that they want to ask, let me know now, follow up on an email. You know, at the end of this, you know, this presentation, I'll make sure to collect those from all of you. Also having the chief.
Wait 1 second, I'm sorry.
Yes.
So how was the decision made to have the two of you meet with her rather than the whole board?
So this meeting was, you know, me meeting with, you know, her, and I think Chair Wilson meeting with her in the context of this task force work, just
Okay.
open lines of communication. That's really what it's about. Open lines of communication, just saying, hi, how is the RPD doing this work? Information gathering.
And can I clarify something as well? We still have a request, Rabbi Settle, from that we put in before the chief was there. So that's still there.
Okay.
And we're still waiting for a meeting for the board.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I think for tomorrow's meeting, reminding the chief, you know, to have a meeting with the board as a whole. I think that's another thing that can happen tomorrow. You know, ensuring our Executive Order 203 outreach informs her work, and I'll get to why that's you know, could be intriguing in a second. And then, you know, asking to make sure that whatever data she produces on her own review can be seen by us. You know, I think it's just important that whoever is doing work on the Rochester Police Department, their data gets sent to us. That's just an important thing. So the mayor's survey is the next thing I want to talk about. You know, I think you all saw Mayor Warren sent out that electronic survey of 9 separate questions. You know, about, it was kind of, the questions were of a general nature, talking about, you know, what data want to be gathered and all that. But the results came out this week. I believe Mayor Warren spoke about this either earlier today or yesterday. I can't remember, to City Council. The brief of that meeting is this: 2,000 people responded to the question. There was a 56-32 split on community support for hiring outside experts like Wilmer Hale. You know,
All right, 50, which is which in the
oh, I'm
split?
sorry, it was a 56 support, 56% support, excuse me. Yeah, 56-32 oppose. I think the important thing about this survey, and this was expressed by a number of people at that city council meeting, that this is a first step and it has significant limitations on it. You know, the executive order task force will get the, you know, there's a comment section in addition to the qualitative, you know, yes or no questions. There was a comment section, and the mayor said that the comments that were made on those 2,000 responses will somehow be provided to the executive order task force. I don't know how that will happen. You know, 2,000 responses is quite a few. So I don't know if there's additional data work being done, whatever, but it's definitely something to follow up with the mayor. And then there was some expressed concerns from council members. It's clear that council members want more data. They want broader questions answered. And finally, they want qualitative data. They want qualitative data. So, you know, this is a good link up between what council members want more in terms of survey data and our proposed executive order work, or at least a proposal for executive order work. You
Connor,
know,
before you move forward,
yes.
I have a couple comments. So will we have access to the results of this if we want?
Yes. So, you know, there was the city did a press release that gives out the top line results. And then the chief data officer, I don't know if it's technology or data officer for the city, helped the mayor do a presentation on the answers to those 9 questions.
Yeah, because I'm really interested in who does that 56% include for myself.
Yes.
You know, so I want to know a little bit more about what that demographic looks like. You know, is it really representative? You know, what population of the city? So I'm just really interested in that. And there was something else that you mentioned before this, and I want to just ask before it slips. In the chief's 90-day review, a couple things, when we talked about Wilmer Hale, when we didn't say once we voted on this, when they would start. So I don't know what a start date would be for them. And then with her 90-day review, I'm just wondering if anything would change in the police department before they are able to do a more thorough review. And those may be questions that you can't answer right now. Maybe that's for tomorrow, but when you discuss that with her. But there's just some questions that's popping up in my mind that I kind of want some clarification around that. I don't know if you can.
Dr. McIntosh, if you, I can go through and write down these questions. If you want to email those specific questions to me, I can follow up directly with the chief. Okay. With regards to the survey question, I will say that, you know, and there's an hour-long presentation from the mayor that gets into a lot of these details. A lot of the questions that people that I think many of us may have had about the survey got posed by city council members. And so, you know, that video gives some of the detailed answers. What I will say is that I don't think the survey asked for demographic information beyond where do you live. And so I think that's a request for the future to make sure that the data that is gathered for future stuff is getting into the nitty gritty of demographics to make sure that it's representative.
Right. Thanks.
So a proposal for executive order work. So just an overview of, you know, where we're at. It's led by Mayor. This executive order works led by Mayor Warren. There's 13 key questions. You know, folks, you can refer to the, there's a Word document that has the 13 questions in it. It's broken up into the 8 questions assigned to the PAB and 5 questions assigned to RPD. I'll be talking about those in just a minute, but just want to make sure you all know and have that. You know, again, the collective task force has to have answers in by January. And as I understand it, our specific answers, just as the PAB, have to be in by the end of November. And so I know there's some looks of concern. I sent an email to the mayor's chief of staff again today. And that's another thing too, is, when I meet with principals, just this relates back to our earlier question. When I meet with principals, I ask, how do you like being communicated with? So for example, Mayor Warren told me, email Brittany Wells, my chief of staff. And so that's what when I want to communicate with the mayor, I email Brittany Wells. So, I just want to say I am happy and eager to learn all these protocols, and I've been trying my best.
So let me, just to clarify.
Yes.
So you said 8 questions will be for the PAB
Yes.
to answer.
Yes.
And 5 questions will be for the RPD to answer.
Yes. And I want to qualify that why. So the mayor assigned these questions. I made clear during the initial meeting, the PAB, should have the responsibility to answer all these questions. The mayor's assignments didn't change. That doesn't mean we can't submit answers on the last 5 questions, but I will also suggest that it might be difficult for us to submit answers to those questions in just a minute.
So I'm just wondering, so if we're answering 8 questions, the RPD is answering 5 questions, what is race, UCLM, what are they answering?
So
or are they just reviewing what we have put together in November in addition to what Wilmer Hale is going to do?
So race and UCLM are also reviewing some of those 8 questions. I believe that race is addressing all 8. I think UCLM is addressing like 6 or 7. But pretty much the 8 questions that aren't being answered by RPD are hold on a second. I'm just going to mute Bob. The 8 questions that are our questions are also, for the most part, races and UCLMs. They're just having their own independent procedures for answering those questions. So by the end of the month, each task force member has to have answers to these questions, and then they all come together in December and they are reconciled then. That's, as I understand it, the time frame. Now, talking to other people in the task force, there's also a sense that that's not enough time. And so that the mayor may have some power to request an extension, and that may happen. But this is the framework as I understand it now. So that's the overview of where we're at. So obviously the challenge, there's there's 13 key questions, but if you break it down in that as broken down by the mayor in that document I sent you, there's over 100 questions that have to be answered. 100 questions in less than a month. End of the month deadline. And also we have 1 full-time staff member to answer these questions. So the task is monumental. And you can see part of the reason why, the mayor wanted, Wilmer Hale to come in and answer at least a subset of these questions, help answer a subset of these questions. And, not all questions are the same, but I'm going to get that into a minute. First, I want to talk about when you have a challenge like this, you have to think about the end goals. So what are our end goals and how do we address the challenge based on our goals? The first is, our end goal, I think, is community control of public safety. We have some short-term goals of being visible, transparent, and showing the community we're here, channeling the community's priorities into the task force's work, and then using the task force to pick the right low-hanging fruit. So, those end goals I've kind of gathered through discussions with all of you. And so given the challenges and given our end goals, how should we approach this? And this is just a proposal from me. To have a goal-driven solution, we have to prioritize which questions we want to answer. You can't answer all of them. We have to prioritize which ones we're going to spend the most time on. Doesn't mean we don't have to provide answers to the questions, but it does mean we can provide summary answers or punting answers, but we'll answer this later, etc. We also have to get answers from the community. Getting answers from the community is going to be a central part of how we can do this. Also, because if it's the community answering, it makes our task a little bit easier, right? And then it shows that we are a conduit for the community. Finally, getting answers that will shape the task force proposals. And this might just seem like obvious, but you could also have a way in which you just get community opinions that are pretty broad or vague, as opposed to really specific answers that can directly translate into policy, procedure, practice changes. So that's what I mean by that last bullet. Okay, so that's the broad approach to the solution.
I have a quick question.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
Please.
So goal-driven solution, get answers from the community. So how, other than telling the community what our email site is, do we put out a call? I mean, is there somewhere where we can put out a call that we need these answers? Like, how do we get access to a larger amount of the community to get these answers?
It's a great question. The next slide answers it. So, how do we do this? We have to divide and conquer with the community. So we have to divide the questions and conquer them in partnership with the community. And I'm going to get to the answer in just a second, Dr. McIntosh, but these are the kind of categories for questions and our answers. So I think one category of questions we should suspend judgment on. So for example, one of the questions is, what is your police department's process for procuring or using a new technology? Right? That will take time to answer. The RPD will provide its own answer on this. We shouldn't necessarily take the RPD's answer as, God's word on this. What we should say is, the Police Accountability Board needs to take the time and energy to actually do a deeper dive to answer this question. So it's a kind of suspend judgment, Then there's a kind of set of answers that can be provided by us, by me and the board as a whole. And it's questions like, what policing activity data should be collected by your department? So there's some best practices that we can look at, and there's some ways that we can answer this question that are kind of technical, but we can also provide brief substantive answers that don't require a ton of staff time, but also allow us to put what has been pushed in other communities forward as a best practice. A practice that might not be suggested by our PD or other folks. And then there's this last category of big picture questions. What functions should the police perform? When should police wear guns? What resources should be reallocated from the RPD? My proposal is to have these big picture questions be the ones that we're asking for direct community input on, community answers. So the answer to your question, Dr. McIntosh, how to do this is through something like a set of community oversight hearings, where you get community testimony on these big questions from a number of subgroups in our community, as many subgroups as possible that we can think of, whether it's, Black trans youth, graduates of certain high schools, people from different religious traditions, those kind of things. And then having them answer the same set of questions over and over again. And they do so by, they get questions from us or through a process. They provide written statements, and then potentially they state those statements in a live public hearing. So that's the process. I'm going to talk about the justification for it and how it would work. So how it would work, we would investigate, we would figure out who are the subgroups that are not at the table, either right now or historically have not been at the table when it comes to policing. Let's talk about people who are facing poverty or homelessness, for example. Those would be people we'd want to hear from. We'd work with our partners in the community who are deeply connected with these folks to get the subgroups we need, people from those communities to speak to us. So for example, Vocal New York would be a fantastic group that has some of these connections. Earlier this week, I met with the Pastors Roundtable, that a phenomenal source of people to speak on behalf of religious traditions here, some religious traditions here. And then, we'd schedule live testimony through a series of hearings, from, probably 5 to 8 or 5 to 9 p.m. on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday evenings, so that both people could participate and the media could watch. We would post these videos online so that people could, look at them forever. And then we would compile all of the written testimony and submit it to the task force in an official government document. And, these are some of the example questions you could ask community members. For each $100 you spend on policing, how much should the city spend on the PAB or, some other resource or something like that, right? So through this question, you can start figuring out community answers about reallocation, that question that the executive order requires us to answer. Questions like, what situation should officers not be responding to first? What changes do you want to see from the police department? And some other questions that get at hard data, right? because part of this process is both, the goal of a process like this is to center community voices, especially ones that are traditionally marginalized, frame them in an official government process, and then deliver them in a way that allows them to be heard and refuses to let them be silenced. A way that government agencies normally deal with community input is by asking for comment, not making it public, just asking the public to submit questions online, and then the agency kind of like refutes all those things and then ignores it. And part of the reason they're able to do that is they don't ask the right questions. They don't ask piercing questions that have to be responded to. So we can frame our process a little differently. So this is the general framework. I know there's going to be a lot of questions and I want to answer those, but I'm going to talk briefly about what I see as the risks and ways to address that. So people may feel left out. And the way to address that is cast a wide net and also say it's the first step. We're doing a lot of work on the front end to make sure that we know which communities we want to hear from. A risk of overwhelming staff. This can be a monumental effort in figuring out how to have everyone involved in the process communicating about limits and then respecting those limits. So that's going to be an important process of this. Again, a risk is asking the wrong questions and figuring out in the end that you didn't get the data or information that you wanted. And so, working with all of you, us all working together as a deep reservoir of knowledge to figure out who needs to be heard, what questions need to be asked, all that. And then finally, let's assume this all runs according to plan, but no one listens. Right? So we have to have real publicity. Let the press know. Get the word out that this is happening, that the PAB is doing this, the PAB is running this process, when it is, all that, so people can tune in. So in summary, the tasks ahead, if we were to adopt this process, will be to select public questions and voices to be heard, and then assemble the voices, schedule the testimony, really get the word out that this was happening. And at the same time, have a parallel track of, staff preparing a draft of answers to the rest of those questions, either the ones that can be, we can suspend our judgment, or we can, give some technical answers to some of these questions. And so that's kind of the framework of the proposal. I know there's a lot of gaps I didn't get to discuss, but that's about it. So there's nothing else I had to talk about in the executive director's report. And so again, just to loop back, the things that I'm looking to do is talk about the details of this, answer any questions, hopefully get board sign off on some plans so we can hit the ground running starting tomorrow. And third, any questions people have about the meeting with Chief Harriet Sullivan tomorrow, please email me those questions before, I believe it's tomorrow at 1 o'clock, Chair Wilson, that we'll be meeting. So get those questions to me if you have any, and know that, we'll be having future meetings with the chief. So not every question needs to get answered. So I'll stop sharing my screen and we can,
The one follow-up question I have to that, I suspect there will not be any exclusions in terms of voices. Like, for example, individuals that have had a lawsuit against RPD, will they be excluded? Individuals that, I guess that was really the big one, but like individuals with, prior felonies, getting those voices at the table too, I think would be helpful. But I'm just wondering about the lawsuit issue. Would that be, cause any exclusion?
That's a great question. For formerly incarcerated people, I don't think that I hope there's not a problem. And those voices need to be at the table, For people who may have, I want to get back to you on that question because it's a tricky one. What I don't want to do is have a process that has people thinking that they're filing complaints with the board, because we don't have that power. And also, I don't want anyone to err in a complaint that makes us unable to hear that complaint in a future hearings process. And so I think having a disclaimer about that, and also framing this as a non-disciplinary process that is just about community input, right? Because I also want to make clear, if someone writes a statement and then in the answer to the question, airs a complaint, that's not necessarily our fault. And it doesn't disqualify this process or anything like that. We can deal with that on a back end, case by case. But having that question addressed up front to everybody, it has to be done.
One of the things that happens in clinical studies is that you have the doctors and nurses, and they're trying to talk to regular people, and they can't do it because there's too great a distance between the professionals that are involved and the clinical people that are involved. And one of the things that's been done more recently is to recruit cultural intermediaries. We all know who they are. Those are the busybodies from the church and from everywhere else that know everything about everybody else's business, are smart enough to understand what 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 their interest is, but are able to communicate with the regular people because they are regular people. Eh, I know I've heard the term cultural intermediary, but you might consider recruiting that kind of cadre to go out into the field and do the contact work.
One of the in that revised budget proposal, there were two people I wanted to hire: a general counsel and a chief of engagement and education. And that person, like the chief qualification, essentially is being deeply rooted in this community. And that's not to say they could perform all of these, because we can't perform all these roles, but that's why part of the reason I wrote the budget memo was because I wanted to get this process off the ground as quickly as possible and make sure that we could hire staff quickly without having to move through unnecessary processes. So I think you're absolutely right. And to the extent that we don't have that staff, all the more important that we work with community partners to get the folks at the table and make sure that we're asking the right questions.
I guess, can you speak a little bit about, because as you just stated, I was going to say a piece about that. If we, especially when things need to be done seemingly by November, the end of November. So being that we're limited right now in our resource, what does that mean for the rest of the board members here? Like what, in terms of that, those questioning, like how can we assist in that role? Maybe kind of doing some of what Bob talked about. Like, is that realistic that we're going to have time to do that? Or is that going to be an expectation? Or how can we assist in that process, I guess?
There are lots of options to have folks, plug in. I defer to, you folks as the board to the extent in which, you want to be a part of this process. I'd love to, have you to the extent that, folks want to. I want to make sure that this process can be done by staff because you are all volunteer, and I do not want to, burden you with, you already do a crazy amount of work for this board. But to the extent that, people do want to plug in, or people do, have a sense of, oh, okay, this is some, I can, this community we need to hear from. Well, I got someone who's perfect for it, because I think that could be a very useful thing people would do. But again, or reviewing the questions or something. But what I don't want to do is have an inter-board process that, pulls people in, makes a ton of work for you all, slows this process down to the point where we can't do the work. So I want to, that's a balance, and I kind of defer to the board on how we want to address that.
So can I ask board members, what are they thinking in terms of, I love the term that Bob used or Dr. Harrison used about cultural intermediaries. We all are, community leaders in our own right. And I know that we have a lot of access to a lot of people that fit in these categories. My main concern was just making sure that we took their statement in a fair, equitable way that wouldn't be seen as biased, since that was what was, stated in the previous meeting. So, we're still trying to work out that process, but, I would love to see the board members, if they could, help in that instance.
Yeah, that was the part 2 of my question.
Yeah.
How can would it be seen as bias if we were doing that? And I don't know if Stephanie could speak to that or
Connor.
So all I'll say is that, think again, the process of asking people to engage with us. I'm not entirely sure how. I don't think that will be bias. I also don't think that, you know, you asking questions of the community, because remember, the way this would work live is that people would have set answers they've already asked, and folks, you know, asking the questions would have set questions that they're answering. There wouldn't be a back and forth, in part because we want people to actually engage in the process and not be afraid. And I know that like being on a public live stream or something could be, you know, difficult. Also, we want to control the time in the process. So, you know, I don't think that the questions themselves, and largely because the governor is asking us to ask them, wouldn't be biased. You know, and also I think the whole point of this process is to serve as a channel for the community. And if the community has, you know, views and we're just channeling them and wrapping them up and saying this is what the community said, I don't think that is bias. What I will say, and I brought this up in confirmation hearings, is we have to draft rules and regulations for bias and recusal. And remember, you know, normally what happens with bias and recusal is it's a case-by-case process, right? So if there's an individual, let's say someone complained against an officer, the officer would make some objection about, we would, you know, the complaint would come in. If we accepted the complaint, we would take a look and say, okay, who is related to either complainant or the officer in any way, business, prior interaction, whatever. And then they have to not be part of the adjudication process, right? So we have to create those rules soon, even though we don't have disciplinary power. Also, not just because it's recusal in the context of discipline, we also need to have recusal in the context of rulemaking, right? And so even if these bias questions don't come up in discipline, they may come up in rulemaking, et cetera. And so ensuring that the public and judges know that we have rules about this and we will follow those rules is the most important thing we can do to control accusations of bias, right? Because let's be real, in every institution, there is prejudice and bias. And the way to deal with that is not to exclude people that have those biases from all decision-making, but to have internal rules that allow them to be excluded on a case-by-case basis. That's the way to do it.
Connor, has there been any discussion in regards to how they're going to deal with language access to those that may speak another language, or perhaps those that are in the deaf community? Like, has that been discussed at all? Because that would be important for me.
Yes. So this is a bit of our trouble. And so I don't even have an account set up with the city yet to make expenditures. You know, the Department of Finance has not gotten back to me about training how to do that, right? So I would love to spend the money we have to hire interpreters and to hire, you know, ASL interpreters, you know, people who do, you know, folks, anyone who, you know, speaks Spanish as a first language, like let's do that. But I don't have the technical ability to make that happen, which again comes back to this independence and budget stuff. It's all kind of interlinked, and you know. So what I can say is I will continue fighting on that,
Well,
you know, because
I'm sorry.
Well, please.
Why do you think is the delay? What's delaying that? What?
Whew. I wish I could say, Board Member Perez. I wish I could say, I don't know why some people don't answer my emails. I don't know why some processes don't get off the rails right. Again, part of my thinking about this was that, you know, people believe that we're a subunit of city council. And so that, you know, BJ Scanlon has to make these decisions for us. And I don't have independent authority to do this. I can't say, but, you know, and also, you know, people are very busy at city government. They have lots of other things to do than, you know, deal with this new guy coming in asking if he can trade on things. I understand that. And I want to say not every process has been slow. You know, for example, the benefits office has been fantastic about being on top of stuff, right? So it's not everyone, but again, a lot of these troubles are rooted, I believe, in the budget process and like whether or not people think we're independent, which is a big reason why I, you know, spent all of Sunday writing that memo, because this has to be addressed quickly so we can do our work effectively.
And I get that people are busy. I get that. We're all busy, right? We're all busy. However, that concerns me, because if that's an area that needs to be discussed in order for us to move forward, you know, how can we do that? How are you going to learn these processes if no one is taking the time to help you get through them? So to me, that's a concern. And, you know, I know that you want to be respectful and give everyone the benefit of the doubt, but how long is that going to take? Can we at least get a deadline as to when when these things are going to happen? Like, I don't want to come to another meeting and we're talking about the same thing again.
So if I can just answer that real quick, I'm sorry, Connor. I think that we should consider writing, I want to just pose this to the board, that I wonder if it's time to write a letter and just ask some questions about the timeline of these things. I know that that this is a staff issue. However, this ball's getting kicked around for a while. And I'm also kind of, echoing the same concerns as, Ms. Ida. And that I really would like to see this move forward, and I'm wondering when that's going to be. So I just am going to leave that out there, and we don't have to discuss that tonight. We can maybe discuss that, at the next meeting, but I just want to throw that out there to the board.
Yeah, and again, this is somewhat systemic. I've been working very hard to get the communication stuff off the ground. I know it's a priority of this board. I fought to get access to Microsoft Teams, and in the Microsoft Teams sub-organization, I don't think I have any power because I'm under BJ Scanlon, right? I don't think I have the power to create my own teams to put all of you on it. In that organizational structure, I believe Councilmember Tucker reports to President Scott. So this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about internal city processes that just don't seem to be helping or working. And again, the delays I've been trying to fight on and haven't been getting a lot of help. And all I'll say is, Board Member Perez, to the idea that we need to keep pushing, and I have faced resistance when I push. I've faced significant resistance from people.
So Connor, what do you need from us? How can we help you to help us and all be successful? What do you need from us?
Well, first, I just want to say, again, I was pretty committed to the way, staff level things, you deal with staff level things until principals figure it out. And my hope was to get this resolved, but it seems now that, board probably needs to get involved. Again, it comes down to this question of independence. It really does. At the end of the day, does the board and the board through its executive director have the ability to operate autonomously? That is at the end of the day what it is, because what I am dealing with for the most part is, again, people thinking that I don't have the authority to make make these things happen. It has to be run through city council, and that I'm not the contact person on some of this stuff. And I just want to say too, there was no formal onboarding process for me for a lot of these procedures. I asked, is there training to deal with this? Is there, for a million different processes. And I was told, there is no formal onboarding for a manager level position like yours. And, there's been a lot of other things too. I asked, a big key part of what I want is pay equity for senior staff, so that, if I hire Black and brown people, if I hire women, will they get paid as much as I do? And, the answer from HR was, you can't do that. And I think maybe part of the reason is that, I don't have the independent authority to decide these things because I'm not a department head. So again, a lot of this comes down to independence, which is why I wrote the memo.
Is there an org chart somewhere?
Is there a
organization chart somewhere? I mean,
so in the law, there's no organizational chart. There's no organizational chart in the city council. Normally, when you have some kind of implied organizational chart, it is the words reports to, is subordinate of, or is a part of. There's no part of the city charter that does that. Within last year's budget that was approved in January, there is an organization chart. There's an organization chart, and I can show it to you. I'd have to find the budget. But it says essentially that, we're a subunit of, I'm actually going to pull this up. Let me get it in front of me so you can see the way that the Office of Management and Budget sees the Police Accountability Board. Let me get here. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. Okay, so this is in the budget. You can see that the Police Accountability Board is seen in this budget as a subordinate unit of City Council. So this is what I had that budget meeting about. I asked OMB and I asked BJ Scanlon, I said, is there a piece of law, a regulation that says that the Police Accountability Board is subordinate to City Council? I didn't get any answer. I believe that this org chart, I don't know who generated it. I don't know where it came from. and I asked for the specific law, rule, or regulation that, this comes from. I just wanted to know, because if there is some rule or regulation that makes us subordinate, that is going to change the way we do our work. And so when I didn't get an answer on that, I wrote this memo because I had to figure it out on my own, because again, no one gave me an answer. So, this memo was me saying, okay, here's what appears to be the answer. Does anyone have any questions or, comments on it? And I heard nothing until tonight's meeting.
So Connor,
I have an observation.
So Bob, Dr. Harrison, can I just interrupt? Because Board Member Perez was just going to say something before you started. So I just
Okay,
wanted to-
sure.
I'm
Thank
sorry.
you.
Thank you. Again, I just can't express enough how disappointed I am. I feel like from the beginning we've been swimming and sinking, and we kept hearing that you'll be able to do this, you'll be able to do that, you'll be able to, we could move forward with this, we can move forward with that, when you have your executive director. Now we have the executive director. It's very disappointing to hear that there was no onboarding training or processes for you. So we're still sinking and swimming. How do they expect us to be successful in what we're doing and what we've been charged to do if the very common 101 type of information or training or policies are not provided? I just can't understand how that's happened, why that's happening. Does this happen to everyone? Is it just us? What is going on?
So Ida, I would probably want to piggyback on that and say, well, is success for the PAB the goal?
Yep,
That would be my question.
I agree.
Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is it my turn now?
It is your turn. Thank you so much for waiting.
It just occurs to me, Connor, that under normal circumstances, a smart guy like you would come into an organization and almost immediately attract a mentor, someone who's been in the system, knows how it works. The problem that we have here is that none of us on the board knows anything about what we're talking about. So you lack that, and you're going to have to. I don't know if you're going to have to, but I think your way will be made a little easier if you can sniff around and come up with someone who is able to act in at least a semi-mentor manner.
I agree. And, I've been meeting with lots of people in City Hall who don't work directly with me, right? People who are.
No, I'm talking about someone like Loretta.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that was the second email I sent was to President Scott, hoping to have a conversation with her.
Well, I'll offer to buy her a drink and have a conversation.
Wow. Okay, folks.
Let me just right quick. I'm not right quick, please.
Go ahead.
I'm not disappointed that your way is actually as difficult as it may seem to be by virtue of how the board was treated prior to you getting here. And for me, waiting on you and when your director Edie come, that was just buying time. It was never for me a open door for us. And again, that takes me back to what I said originally, which is kind of what I think Bob is saying, the mentor. You're very smart, and sometimes smart is offensive. And it was smart is offensive. I'm telling you, smart is offensive. You heard a couple of times or more in the meeting on yesterday, you are Ivy League man. You're an Ivy League man. That was mentioned several times. And people will go out to prove the fact. Your memo, I've been reading your memo, the memorandum. It's a very smart document to people who are not as smart as you are. And the recourse to the lack of smartness is the treatment that you're getting right now. And I'm in no wise am I saying dumb down, but I'm saying what Bob is saying. That's when I said kind of ease up a little bit, a mentor, get the lay of the land. The plan is wonderful, but it's
Right.
it's the last thing I say, and we don't want to use the term politics. It's a game.
Right.
It's a game. And you got to know how, just like you say, you're the executive director for the PAB. And I was like offended to hear you say how you have to contact the mayor. Your contact to the mayor, and you're the executive director of a very important board, a board that the city put together, voted for. 75% of the citizens of Rochester voted for this board. And people who are not nearly as important as you are got direct access to the mayor, and you've got to go through a process. I was offended when we first started this conversation about how you got to get to the mayor.
So I just want to.
But lastly, it's all in the politics.
Yeah.
It's all in the game. And Connor, you got to play the game.
I couldn't agree more, Dr. Harvey, in terms of, looking for to work with everyone and be not just smart, but smart, like you're talking about, be actually smart. There's no doubt about that. All I want to say is this, is that I was very reluctant to send that memo. I was very reluctant. I did not want to do it. I did not want to send that thing. But when when people said you have to submit this budget by the end of the week, we aren't going to make, no, we're not going to take no for an answer. We're not going to talk about it. It was a choice of either giving up what I believe is the board's legal powers and duties, or, doing nothing. And so, I thought that was the right thing to do. And I think that moving forward, that doesn't matter. Thinking it's the right thing to do, thinking about the smart thing to do is the most important thing. So I'm going to follow that advice.
So, sorry, I know you want to
say one thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
But I agree 100%, Reverend Harvey, what you're saying. But two also caveats. We've already had a really smart person chairing this board and another really smart person co-chairing, vice chairing this board for 8 months, and they have not been given that access either.
Thank you.
It's a travesty as well.
Thank you for saying that.
Just because Connor is smart, because he's the ED, like they should have had that line too. And so I think that needs to be said. That no, that's not a diss to Connor, and Connor wouldn't take it that way, which is why we hired him. But we've already had smart people running this board, and we've been treated poorly since the beginning. The other thing is, in addition to, yes, got to play the game. We all know how this works. There's egos, like Reverend Harvey, you know how it is with ministers in particular. This feels like being a first-year pastor in Bible study, right? And at the same time, humble people know when someone has something to teach them. And if you want to be a leader in our government, then you should be humble enough to realize when somebody is offering a dialogue with you. And what we saw in that meeting was not people who are willing to learn and to grow and have a democratic debate, but people who wanted to protect whatever they're trying to protect. And I think that we need to see some humility there as well. So some humility and some equity. And there has not been equity in the way this board has been treated because of Chair Wilson and Vice Chair McIntosh have not been afforded that respect from the beginning.
Can I say one just quick thing? Because I don't know if it probably won't make anyone feel better. It'll probably make you feel worse. My informational session ended before I talked about limitations on the board. One of the things I wanted to talk about is, according to the text of the city charter, what you guys couldn't have done without an executive director was extremely limited. You retained, according to the city charter text, almost all your power. So the idea that you guys were bound for 8 months, again, maybe there's some other lawyer's interpretation that we need to sit down and talk with, but like the face of the statute's pretty clear. You guys could have been doing a lot of stuff.
So I just wanted to say that well, thank you, Reverend Nikoloff, and also Dr. Harvey, because that's also true.
Before we end, I wanted to
Thank
jump
you.
in and say something too.
Yeah, so one of the things I think that kind of circling back is just making sure that we, when we talk to city council, we have some really serious concerns about processes. And again, this, I understand that this position is new. I understand that this board is new and unprecedented. However, there were clear issues from the start of, the executive director starting. And I really wished that, there had been more of a process as to what happens up there. And even, Dr. Harrison is right as well. It's like, you don't know the lay of the land, right? Dr. Harvey said the same thing. You need somebody to kind of help you navigate that. Had it seems like from all this outcome from today, it seems like that was not clearly communicated unless somebody else can offer a different explanation to us. And I think that, considering that, there has been such an issue with this, I think that it's time that we, have a meeting with city council and also folks before Dr. McIntosh speaks. I want to be transparent. So BJ Scanlon did write to us during this meeting and said that, because I asked about meeting with city council, a follow-up email that I sent, because I hadn't heard in a while, was on October 2nd, right before I think we confirmed Connor or announced Connor. And I did not write back because, the email shuffle and all of that. And I didn't hear anything back as well. So I went ahead and asked for a meeting for everybody. And then I also asked for an individual time with President Scott, because I also have some, additional concerns that I would like to raise as the chair. And I'm hoping that I can have both of those meetings, which I'm sure I will. I don't think that it'll be a problem, but I want us to, sit down and talk about some of these processes, especially since this has not existed before. And I don't want anybody else to go through, what Connor has gone through starting this position. You want to keep people.
So the only things that I want to comment on is, number one, the memo's already been sent. That's one thing that we can't change that. And it's unfortunate that you're going to be looked at through the lens of the memo. So that's unfortunate, but we can't get that back. Number two, I hear Reverend Harvey saying that you're smart. Yes, you're very smart, but that's not why we hired you, because you're the best fit for this position. We hired you because we saw that you were able to come in, hit the ground running. You were able to, put your processes in place, and you had a document, and you're starting to implement that. So, I would just say that, unfortunately, things, there's going to be issues, and whether there's challenges in terms of getting, the onboarding or the process as fluid as we would like, I would just encourage you to seek out those opportunities as much as you can. Keep knocking at those doors. Someone eventually has to open them. So I would just encourage you to continue to do that. And and you're equipped with what you need to do, what you need to do. We've seen that in your presentation, in your interviews. So it's not just about being smart. It's about what we have seen that you're able to do just in, laying out your documents and being able to hit the ground running, and to be able to, do that work and continue on that path. So I hope that's helpful.
Thank you.
Can I piggyback on one last thing that was said tonight as well? There's an implication by one, I can't remember who said it, about bias on the board. And this idea, just piggybacking on the idea of how much work this board has been doing. Bias does not mean that you don't have opinions. It's about how you manage your opinions, right? It's about how you put them aside to look objectively at something. Nobody is not biased. The current members of the board, as it stands, have worked tirelessly for 8 months. We're passionate individuals. We have lots of skin in lots of games. And I've not seen one member of this board out marching, not one member of this board out posting rants and doing the kinds of stuff that would be implied to be bias. I think people here have not only struggled with that, wrestled with it, and it's caused a great deal of it's been something we've had to learn on the job, right? Which is another reason why we need those recusal laws up front for both new board members as they come on, so they're aware of what they're going to go through. but also to tell people, to say like that the fact that no one has heard anything from us should be an indication that we're working, that bias isn't something you just have, it's something you work at, and it's something that's practiced. And it's insulting that that would even come up at that council meeting, that somehow this board has shown any kind of bias in terms of when it's been one of the things I think I'm most proud of this board for, really putting aside our passions for the sake of the passion we have for this board and the work we have to do.
So folks, for the interest of time, hold on, Dr. Harvey. It is 8 o'clock, and I know that we want to be mindful of time. Everybody has their busy lives, so I'm gonna ask Dr. Harvey to speak, and then I'm gonna say one last thing, and then take a vote to close the meeting. Okay, unless anybody else has anything to say. Go ahead.
Someone say, Connor, you've listened to 3, 6, 7, 8 of us give you advice, so you got to process even all of what we've said, because everything that has come to you tonight hadn't all been congruent. Some of it has been different. I do say hit the ground running, but if you want to run long, then you can't run fast. You got to again see where you're going before you take off running. That's my advice. Don't just hit the ground running. I think why we've hit these walls, what you're doing is what I do. And why we've hit these walls is because you hit the ground running. Don't run until you see where you're going and you know where you're going. And if you want to run long, don't run so fast. That's all. That's my advice.
Okay. All right. Okay, folks. So the last thing I'll say is that, I've learned so much chairing this board, and about myself, about me being a leader, about all of you, and about our quirky foibles and our, all of our chiding and learning how to grow together as a board. I'm extremely proud of this board. I'm extremely proud of us individually and all the unique talents and perspectives and histories that we bring. And, I'm proud of us. And I think that you should be proud of yourselves. This is something that is going to change the history of Rochester. This is something that is going to help a lot of people. And I will never be sorry for that. And so with that, I'm going to make a motion to end the meeting. Oh, Connor, go ahead.
Connor?
All right.
It has been to be frank, it's been a very difficult couple of weeks at work. It's been difficult trying to, fight and do this work, all that. I won't get into the details, but I will say is that, as I said at the beginning, you guys are the reason I do this. And I think someone asked what I need. And because it can be pretty isolating at work with a lot of people who might not see the board as you all do, having your full support, being ready to show up, to speak, not just on me, but for the board itself, the powers and independence of the board. That's what you asked what I want, and that's what I want.
Okay.
And Connor, regardless, I'm not a runner, but I do think you need to hit the ground running, and that's what you've done. That's what we've been waiting for, and I will run with you.
I think the last thing is, I think we should get Connor an extra set of butt cheeks.
Oh my gosh. Such a goofball.
Y'all knew that was coming.
At least we ended on a chuckle, All right. We do. I'm going to make a motion to end the meeting.
I vote to end the meeting.
All right. All in favor of ending this meeting?
All right.
All right. All right.